welcome to Crossover Event. We're back again. This week we've got Harris in for Martin Thomas, who is off on an island somewhere doing, I don't know, what do people do? I've never been on an island, so I don't know.
I think mostly he's just got, like, some drink that came in a coconut.
Yeah, I mean, ew. Really? Can't you just put it in a cup? Or at least a copper mug? I'm just saying. Maybe I like who drinks in copper mugs. But also, of course, Danni Danger here.
Hi, everybody.
Oh, I'm Chris from oneofus.net. We're going to be talking about films based on, or just stuff in general, based on myth and legend. And the reason for that is because there's a new movie coming out by Robert Eggers called The Northman, which I know you guys have not seen yet, but oh my God, will you go see it already? It's so amazing. I can't wait to talk to you about it. I mean, like,
this has been what he's been like ever since the screening.
You should have seen me. I was like, walked out of that screening with like tears in my face. Like, what are you doing? Why are you crying? It wasn't even like it was sad. I'm like, it was just so beautiful and also brutally violent. But it's based on Norse mythology, and we don't get much in the way of Hollywood type material based on Norse mythology. We always get Greek mythology, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they do anything, it's Greek mythology. But in this particular case, yeah, Norse mythology in one of those, like, maybe gods are involved, maybe they're not. Doesn't matter. Go see it. But that being said, I wish Basil Polidorus was doing the soundtrack for this episode because, like, Jesus Christ. Like, that's the guy who did Conan, by the way. We're going to talk about myths and legends and the other films and TV shows and comics and what have you that we have loved that really got into that and worked for us. We can't really talk about The Northman, obviously, but we're going to talk about other stuff. And I'm going to hand it over to Harris and Danni right here and just go, what are the things that right off the bat you think of when I said, let's do a thing about the greatest myth and legend stuff? What did you think?
Especially since the starting story for this was The Northman, my immediate thought was a manga series that just recently got an anime adaptation called Vinland Saga. If you like Vikings or you like Vikings Valhalla, this is a story for you. It is about a young man named Thorquil who is basically dreams of kind of going Viking because Viking is a job amongst the northern tribes. And one day he's just in Greenland with his family and a bunch of longships show up and mercenaries get out and they go up to his father who, as long as he has known him, has been this, very large but very peaceful, very, kind man, and said, "Oh yeah, you're what's your name, the troll. We need you to come with us." And everyone's just like, "Wait, what do you mean he's the troll?" It's like, "Oh no, you skipped out on your Viking band. You need to come with us and fulfill your contract," and drag them along. And becomes the story of Thorkill learning about becoming a Viking, learning about his father, and also up to a certain point, and this is a spoiler, but for midway through the series, suddenly discovering that he does not want to be a Viking anymore and understanding why his father chose pacifism. And it gets a lot into the concept of the afterlife between the Vikings Valhalla and the Christian heaven and hell. It is a really well done, remarkably, almost painstakingly accurate series. And if you like Northmen, if you like Vikings, it is definitely one to check out.
So that is that's an anime?
Yeah, it is an anime and a manga series. It is currently up to 12 volumes, I believe.
Wow, holy crap. Like, I'm still... Like,
that's nothing for a manga series.
I know. I'm still the guy who goes, I love Akira. Like, it was formative for me. I watched it in the theater, in one of those big, fancy, old 100-year-old theaters. Like, oh my God, blew me away. You're like, don't you want to watch the manga series? What happens next? Sure, how many volumes are there? Oh, crap. No, I don't.
Danni, it's only 100.
Yeah.
Danni, what about you?
I mean, I would say that in the future, I'm super excited, piggybacking on the Vikings and Valhalla. Of course, Thor: Love and Thunder is going to be awesome, and then the Thor comics and everything surrounding those. But I'm going to take a bit of a different direction, because the first thing that came to mind for me was the comic book Fables, which is like a Bill Willingham joint about all of, basically, if there was a hidden city in New York, or a hidden portion of New York that was called Fabletown, and it's where all of the lead characters to every fairy tale in the world live. Some of them are living on Earth. They had to exit their lands because of a dark takeover. And so now they're just like kind of doing their thing in New York. So you've got Snow White, you've got Bigby Wolf, you've got Cinderella, who is like a secret spy assassin. You've got Sleeping Beauty and the Beast, who are like this couple that's like constantly bickering with each other. Pinocchio, Geppetto. I mean, pretty much just anyone that is a part of a myth or a legend or some sort of a tall tale that's been handed down through generations. And it's not just European too. They get into one of my favorite parts of the story is when they get into like Arabian Nights and a lot of that legend and mythology. I'm a big fan of stories about and the legends and mythology that surrounds jinn.
Yeah.
And how like so many concepts of what the jinn are and that they were like born of Lilith and that kind of thing, and how that really ties into some of the European fairy tales that clearly through some point in history like kind of lifted that concept and translated it into into our cultures and society. And Fables just has a really good modern appreciation for those works and integrates them really well into a story that is super captivating and really beautiful to look at. And I'm a big fan.
I love the gin, but admittedly I'm from more Irish origin, so I like the whiskey better. So it's just, did I really make that joke? I'm so sorry.
Hanging there, the lowest fruit possible.
The lowest fruit! I was just like batting at it like a cat. Of all the gin joints in all the world, you had... No, I'm not going to do that. Sorry. I love Fable so much. Up until the point where the story finishes, and you can watch, there's like 3 graphic novels of them struggling to figure out what to do next. But that's like 20 graphic novels in or something. But that's a great run, and I love that they totally go towards the grim fairy tales version.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
The super origins of stuff. It does tie into real mythology. It gets into the origins of all these things, which often tied into gods and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. I'm going to say, y'all both been talking comics, and I'm going to go with Oh Brother, Where Art Thou by the Coen brothers, which is the Tale of Odysseus.
Yep.
I know you didn't possibly get that if you're not super familiar with like Homer, but like, I don't mean from The Simpsons, but
but it's the movie that made us all Dapper Dan men.
Exactly. But you watch that and you're like, there's something about this that's magical and special in a way that the movie never overtly details, because it is the adventures of Odysseus. It's this incredible journey of these characters. It's based pretty closely in their weird sort of like transfer to, what was it, 1920s, I think, of this. It's just this beautiful experience, and the more I watch it, the more I find joy in it. I mean, I've always loved the Coen brothers for their super goofy stuff when they're like, oh, we're just like having a great time. And this is one of the best examples, if not next to Raising Arizona, their best example of like, oh, we're all having a great time. And one of the ones that actually they got a lot of awards notice for when it came out. And maybe that's because the Academy responds to stuff based on classical literature.
I don't know. They love stuff that makes them feel like they're smart.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe I do too. I don't know, because I really liked it.
Speaking of which, and bouncing off of that, since you mentioned it was based on the story of Odysseus, and I may be the only person who remembers this, there was a cartoon in the early to mid 80s called Ulysses 31 that was a sci-fi version of the Odyssey, where the main character, Ulysses, is a fighter pilot who's like flying a spaceship, and they destroy what is basically a sentient satellite that was the Cyclops, and all of his crew gets turned to stone, and his journey is to try to figure out how to undo this. And it's a really interesting, I noticed very carefully, I don't say good, because it is 80s as hell, cartoon to watch, and if you ever watch it, the theme song will be stuck in your head for decades, trust me, I know.
Danny, what do you think?
I think that, for like the elder millennial crowd, our first exposure to myths and legends were a lot of the Disney movies, right? So you've got Hercules, you've got Aladdin, you've got Mulan, you've got there's just so even going back into The Sword and the Stone. Disney is all about taking those myths from from back in the day and really scrubbing them up, making them a lot less murdery, a lot less rapey, a lot less just general violence and starvation and deathy.
I mean, some of them are really good.
Slapping musical numbers on them.
I mean, they're fun. Like, I love a lot of those, but it also might be the introduction point for a lot of people who are going, wait, what? This is based on real stuff? I want to know more about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, it's fascinating to me because like a lot of those stories of the Grimm fairy tales days, for example, were that way because times were grim. Like the death rate was a lot higher. It was a lot harder to just be a human and exist and stay alive and don't die.
I remember.
But even Song of the South is one of those because Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, Brer Bear are basically Americanized versions of African gods and trickster spirits. Yeah. Like there's a direct lineage between Brer Rabbit and trickster spirits like Anansi the Spider.
Mm-hmm.
This is why I brought him on this show, because I was like, he's going to know stuff like that. Everyone's like, oh God, you didn't just bring up Song of the South, did you? And then he's like, oh, but this is a good reason to bring up Song of the South. I got the knowledge. I'll drop it.
Well, and that sort of plays into the way that we, these fairy tales and these myths, or these myths and legends are retold through generations. Yeah. And so when you look at the way that Disney has retold them, it is a reflection of how the quality of life has changed for people. That's the Disneyfication of those stories definitely reflects this like mid-century modern, like we do, we don't die from exposure all the time.
No, you're absolutely right. Like there are so many Disney adaptations of these myths and legends. I mean, like even the Hawaiian one recently. What was
Moana?
it? Mm-hmm. I mean, it didn't help that it had Lin-Manuel Miranda doing the songs for it, which are like the crackiest stuff ever. Also, watch Deadpool 2 online on YouTube, which uses all the songs from that and adapts it into Marvel Universe because it's great. But
oh God,
just saying, it's amazing.
God. I don't know how to picture that. That's horrifying.
Oh, you have not seen
this?
Get
on the ride.
Oh, I see what's happening here. You faced a mask with Deadpool and you're scared. You feel your knees start to shake. Did you just piss? Your faceless goons are always unprepared. Meet my two girls, let's be clear. Yes, it's me, Dwayne Johnson. Eyes up here.
I get it. Like, there is certainly arguments to be made on either side of like, oh, it's offensive that you're like taking this. Okay, we're talking about myths and legends and what have you. I feel like to some degree they belong to everyone once it gets past like 1,000 years.
I mean, at a certain point, like there's absolutely a valid conversation to be had in like when you tell these myths and stories, are you telling them in a way that is respectful and in admiration of the culture that created it? Or is it a farce? Is it appropriation? Yeah. And those are very important conversations that we should always continuously be having.
You should probably use the people of the right color and culture of those myths to tell those myths.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they don't.
Yeah, and you can absolutely see that shift in Disney content over the last few years and how impactful it has been for everyone, specifically members of those community, but also for people like me who, would have benefited very much from growing up in a world that just exposed me to more diversity of people. Like that's something I had to unlearn first as an adult before I could then go back and relearn.
I feel like Mulan was the turning point for them of like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna actually have non-white people telling stories that didn't come from white culture. And yes, you should. That's important because there's non-white people everywhere. Funny how that works. But I know that this is not strictly speaking a mythology in and of itself that previously existed, but it's sort of an incorporation of every previous existing mythology with like creating a sort of archetypal thing on top of it that's definitely sort of Jungian, which is Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. And Gaiman has done a lot of stuff with mythology throughout his career. I mean, in fact, I was talking with the Northman to start this out. He did the starter book on Norse mythology that I believe is just called Norse mythology.
Yes.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's just like, here's a relatively simplified version of a translated version of the original Norse myths that are wacky as hell, but super fun and awesome to read, which, you know, you're going to recognize that stuff popping up in some of the things you've seen. But The Sandman was really his, I mean, magnum opus. Is anyone going to deny that The Sandman is his magnum opus? I mean, like, it's...
No, I would say it's Spawn number 5.
That is a good issue, though. And he made more money from that probably than he did from The Sandman.
I don't know, now that Netflix is doing the adaptation, that may change.
But The Sandman is a great starter point to people who are like, you know, of a certain age, which I mean, like, you're probably like 16 or so. If you're like, okay, I want to really get into not just myths and legends, but the subtext beneath myths and legends and how they affect modern day culture even today. And it's a masterwork. It's the only comic book that I own the entire run in the giant leather-bound slipcase editions of. And I own 4 other editions besides
I think the
that,
first
too.
story arc is even called... Fables and Nocturnes, or one of
Nocturnes
the
and Fables.
Nocturnes and Fables,
yeah.
That's like deliberately about, and The Sandman is such a great read too, because you can read it through several times and have it memorized, and then later in life you are doing research or some other kind of myth and fable comes to your attention and you're like, oh my god, I get it, like I get why this was in that book, I've seen this before. It's just a hodgepodge of like the history of humanity in terms of fables and characters.
And that's just it. It incorporates all these fables throughout, just like everywhere on the earth. Like throughout the entire run, it ends up going like, we went everywhere and tries to find the common ground between them as it relates to you as a human being reading this thing. And it's kind of brilliant. I always go like, this is kind of for our time the definitive statement on myths and legends.
Yeah, there's one of the story arcs where he has the key to hell and he's trying to decide who to give it to.
My favorite one.
Is where you get where you get a lot of different Asian culture fables and myths. You get the Asgardian like fables and myths, or Norse. His version of Norse mythology,
Egyptian, all that comes together.
Yeah, and it is it's a really fascinating to see these mythical characters interact with one another. Was just really well handled, and
also dealing with the question of what happens to gods or religions when they no longer have worshippers.
Yes,
and it becomes very interesting especially because since Sandman was written in the 80s at a time when Japan was at its economic peak. One of the things they bring up in that arc is that the Japanese deities have diversified. And they, just like how Japan was buying up so much of American properties and American companies, the Japanese deities were buying up all sorts of different icons and legends. So they say, we now own Marilyn Monroe. We now own the Statue of Liberty. And it's a very interesting commentary on what was going on in the world at the time through this prism of exploring these other, what happens with mythologies when the people no longer follow them.
Yeah, no, and I like that ultimately the reason for setting up a archetypal, very generalized idea of gods that are the main characters in his books, like death, destiny, desire, dream, is because the gods from all these mythologies are so much more specific. And he had to set up somebody who was just like, yeah, we're the ones that we're kind of above them, but we don't want to be, we're not the gods that get worshipped. Nobody worships us. We're just the incarnations of the basic ideas that are the core elements of the human consciousness. And that's kind of amazing. But it gets more than enough chance to explore all the rest of it. Yeah, brilliant. If you haven't read it yet, I don't know what you're doing. I don't even know why you're watching this and not read The Sandman yet. But I'll try and let you follow that. What do you got?
Well, I would say the obvious follow-up for Sandman would be to read Michael Carey's Lucifer, which takes the Lucifer character from Sandman and explores more not just about hell and about Lucifer himself as the fallen angel, as the light bringer, but also, again, brings up even more of those, where at one point he is in hell, and by hell I mean Hel, the Norse hell, and escaping, and is dealing with characters like, from Norse mythology, like Bergelmir the Giant, and having to get out of hell, building this famous boat from, I forget the name of it because I can't pronounce Norse, that is made out of dead men's fingernails, and, doing things like Tooth Gnasher and the other, Thor's other goat, which can die and be eaten, but as long as you leave the bones, they resurrect the next day.
Right.
And it really gets into a lot of those nitty-gritty details. But another one that a lot of people don't realize is based on mythology, Dragon Ball.
Okay.
Dragon Ball, the original one, not Dragon Ball Z, GT, or any of the other follow-ups.
Oh, there's a difference?
Yes,
Okay.
Significantly. For starters, Dragon Ball has a plot.
I'm not dismissing it. I'm just saying.
Dragon Ball is an adaptation of Journey to the West, the oldest story that we know of, where Goku is literally Son Goku, or just Monkey, and so many of the other characters in it, like Yamcha, the shape-changing pig, those are all from the Journey to the West.
Didn't know that. You should watch the Stephen Chow series of Hong Kong films that are literally called Journey to the West. There's 2 of them, maybe a third one. I'm not really sure. I know they were planning on a third one, but they're also the same thing, except they're directly based on them.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys are gonna kind of hate this.
Oh,
You're either
God.
gonna love this or hate this. But I've said this for a while, that specifically when you're talking about like DC Comics and the archetypal characters that you have in DC Comics, I absolutely believe that superhero stories are our modern mythology.
Absolutely.
Grant Morrison agrees with you.
Yeah.
I'm sure we agree on quite a few things. But
Yeah, thank God for Grant Morrison. He's one of the few of the classic, crazy, groundbreaking comic writers who hasn't proven himself to be a complete prick.
I just just I will always love that man just for creating Quentin Quire. That's all he had to do to be one of my favorite humans. Anything that he does above that is just bonus points. But when you look at and I want to deal specifically with the 3 world's finest, right? You've got your Amazonian warrior who came up in a time of women's lib and really sort of took on that personification and became, look at the Ms. Magazine cover with featuring Wonder Woman, absolutely became attached to that archetype. Then you have the alien, the good-hearted, all-American alien from outer space who comes to Earth to, with all of these powers to protect us. And that is absolutely an archetype as well. You also have the Dark Avenger anti-hero. And those, there are so many things about specifically those 3 characters that we use as a medium to interface and to interact with the struggles that we're dealing with today, right? And I genuinely feel like, if there's some anthropologist from another planet or civilization who's dusting off our old stuff,
They'll be like, I think they believed in superheroes.
yeah, and just be like, oh, these were the myths and legends that people told each other about the world in the early 2000s of Earth.
I think about that all the time, and you look about the amount that people online argue and get heated about what's happening in comic book storylines, whether in comics or in the movies or TV shows. This has become a weird sort of grounding point for what are we talking about the human race and where we should go in some way.
The fight between the Zack Snyder fans and the MCU fans could practically be seen as warring ideologies.
Yeah, probably can, although probably that one has a little bit more to do with poor writing versus good writing. So I'm just saying. I want to finish this up just by saying, hey, Thor Love and Thunder is coming out soon.
Yes.
I mean, we started with talking about the Northman, so we got to talk about Norse mythology here and go man, the first trailer came out and I was like, yeah, it's a teaser. It's a teaser. But
Consider me teased.
It gave me, consider me teased. I'm touching my nipples. It was really good. And I was one of the people who at the end, when Jane Foster catches that hammer, I knew it was coming. Mm-hmm. We all knew it was coming, but I just hair on the back of the neck raised up because Jason Aaron's run on the comic Thor is, it's tied. Walter Simonson, him for best run ever. J. Michael Straczynski's run is also really, really great, but man, it's great. And I've seen people on the internet go, that doesn't make any sense. Why would Jane Foster become Thor? That never happened in the comics. You don't know what you're talking about. That was like 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Jane Foster was Thor.
This is another way of saying I don't like women's.
We don't have to say Thorina. We don't have to say like, she's not a comedian.
Yeah, she wasn't Thor-El.
Yeah.
Or Lady Thor. She was just Thor.
Yeah, and it was an amazing run of the books, and I can't even tell you, when I heard they were doing this, I was beside myself of excitement, going like, oh my God, I'm so excited they're doing this. And apparently so was Natalie Portman, who thought that they had just gone like, whatever, we'll call you if we need you. I mean, you are under contract and all. And they're like, no, come back. She's like, fine, I'll come back. What do you want me to do? Stand there for 10 minutes of the film and go like, oh, Thor, I'm so glad you're helping. Like, no, you're going to become Thor. And she went, oh, I'm all in.
Talk about a redemption arc.
Yeah.
And judging by the guns she's rocking in that trailer, she's Thor as hell now.
I'm kind of surprised you didn't wear your Gold's Gym shirt today to show off your guns. Jesus Christ.
Gotta save something for the bonus content.
Nice. Speaking of, let's watch that bonus content. Oh, wait. Can you? You can if you're a subscriber at oneofus.net. Like literally $5 a month, and you can get the bonus video that comes out every week after this, where we talk about more. And this week we are, in fact, going to talk about more because we have more stuff to discuss that comes out of this topic. More movies, more comics, what have you. Join, and you'll have access to that. But for the rest of you who are going to be lame, sorry. Thanks for watching this. I appreciate it. You should subscribe to Screen Fanatic, because that's where so much more good stuff beside this show comes out. Danny is on
I just did a reaction video
stuff.
to that Thor teaser trailer, and let me tell you, turn the volume down.
Oh, you got too excited? You squeaked too hard?
I did. I squeaked pretty hard.
Over squeaked. I got it. I've been there many times. But yeah, subscribe to Screen Fanatics. Subscribe to belloflostsouls.net on YouTube as well if you like tabletop gaming and those sort of things. That stuff is amazing. But for this episode of Crossover Event, thank you to Dr. Nerdloves, which you can see drnerdlove.com. If you want dating advice and you're a nerd, this is the guy to talk to. And subscribe to, as I said, belloflostsouls.net and Screen Fanatic, where you can see more of Danni Danger doing her thing, which is amazing. And please subscribe to oneofus.net. I'm just begging you here. We'll be back soon, or you can get more of us if you're a subscriber. Either way.